Welcome back to the Successful Working Parents Podcast, the podcast where we talk to successful working parents, if you can believe that. My guest today, she is the co-founder and CEO of Sundays, soon to be mother of one. Ladies and gentlemen, Ashley Chang. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you today. You're actually our very first guest who is soon to be a parent. So I'm really excited to see how this conversation goes. Why don't you just give us a quick intro on your career?
Yeah. So I am the co-founder and CEO of Sundays. Sundays is an executive assistant service for working parents. We are about 2 years old today. And before this, I spent my career in the tech industry, mostly in product management roles, and was super inspired to start Sundays by seeing a lot of the smartest people I know really struggle after they had kids and had to try to balance demanding roles and the family lives that they wanted.
Mm. So, what does Sundays do?
Yeah. I told you I came from a product management background. I started Sundays by just doing research with a ton of parents. I talked to like 300 parents and I was like, what makes it so hard to balance family and work? And I was looking for like an app or a product to build. But the more people I talked to, the more I realized that nobody really needs another app. Parents, I'm sure you're familiar, are already using a ton of apps.
Oh
And
yeah.
so what we do today is we actually are a totally human team. We have a team of executive assistants. They are all parents and all based in the US. And then we pair the families that we work with one person on our team. So it's super relationship based. They get to know you, your family, how you think. And then they become a partner in kind of tackling all the life ops or admin that it takes to keep a family running, which can be a lot.
Yeah.
And that's why we call it company Sundays, because I talked to all these parents and they were like, I spend my whole Sunday with a to-do list that's like a mile long of all the life admin that we need to do.
That's great. So they're getting paired with an actual human being, executive assistant, essentially.
Yeah.
And is there like a certain number of hours a day or a week, or how do you get? Let's say I get one. How do I get to interact with them?
Yeah, you basically buy a block of hours on a monthly basis. Our minimum is just 5 hours a month, and then we go up from there. I would say most families are around 10 hours a month, so a couple
Mhm.
hours a week. And then you can send, usually people come to us with like a backlog of tasks that they're like, oh, I really wish someone would help me with this. Um, And then as we get to know them, we proactively can suggest things that we think would be helpful for their family. And then behind our team, we have a little bit of technology where we keep track of the projects we work on. And now that we've been doing this for a couple of years, we actually have some pretty interesting data of like, this is what most families like yours are doing in January or February, or what they could be doing to feel a little bit more prepared for the rest of the year.
Yeah. So, what are some of the key things or the biggest things that working parents are looking for help with?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It depends parent to parent because everybody has different things that they enjoy and they like doing and things that they feel like are really a chore. So
Mhm.
we try to figure that out. But across the families we work with, I think of it kind of in three buckets. The first is like life maintenance stuff. So making dentist appointments, making sure your car oil got changed, and then like the mental work of remembering that that needs to happen again 6 months later so that your car doesn't get mad at you. Then we do a lot around different phases of life. So we see a lot of people who have 2-year-olds who are kind of going through the preschool application process, or older kids that are getting into extracurriculars and you have to register them every few months. And then finally, we do a lot around seasonality. So right now it's February. We're doing a lot of like summer camp registration, summer planning.
Mhm.
And we helped a lot in the fall with like everything from finding Halloween costumes to ordering Christmas presents, things like that.
So it sounds like you're collecting data and using that to take some learnings and then make the product better or make suggestions and things like that. How is that actually being captured? Is there some sort of data collection system, or are you just like kind of talking to the assistants to hear what they're hearing, or how are you actually capturing data and making
Yeah, it's a
choices?
we have a project management system that we use for the families we work with. So we try to classify all the things that we're working on so we can see like, okay, a lot of people are asking for summer camp help, or like a lot of people are trying to do like meal planning, or I think meal planning is really common, do things like that. But also a lot of it just comes from having people who are parents themselves and have like the expertise of what it takes to run their own family, and then they can put themselves in another family's shoes and be like, okay, when my daughter was 4, when I had a daughter who was 4 and a son who was 2, like these are the types of things that were really important to me.
Hmm. That's really interesting. So, what like specifically about being an early working parent, because you're soon to be a working parent yourself? What are you hearing from the users as far as what they need the most help with in those first few months when they return to work?
Yeah, I think that there is, so we try to also have like life events and have like checklists around. I'm also like a huge list maker myself. So I'm like our new baby slash pregnancy checklist is intense at this point. But
Yeah,
we have like tactical things that people need help with. So there's like figuring out your medical bills and maybe like negotiating with the hospital and things like that, or like getting your kids onto your health insurance, things like that. And then there's a lot more like system building. So I think that people run into like big changes and they're like, okay, the way I used to plan meals for, especially if you're having your first kid, like the way that me and my husband used to plan meals is like not going to work anymore because we're going to have way less time. We might be feeding someone else, like things
sure.
like that. And so there's a combination of like tactically, like here are all the things you need to knock out, plus building new systems for families. And we kind of see that restructuring of systems every time that there's a big change, whether that's another kid or someone got a new job and they have to go into the office, things like that.
So I'm like a little bit of a type A control freak. Okay, so this sounds really intriguing to me, but how does somebody like myself just let the person do the thing for 2 hours after I say what I need help with and not check in or kind of be more collaborative? Like how do you
Yeah,
just
I love it. I am also, I'm sure you could tell, but I am also a type A control person. There's two, I think there's two like types of work that we tend to work with people on. One is like recurring projects that you know how you like it done. And so like
Mhm.
if you already know how you like something done and you just want it done for you, then we ask you, or we think it's helpful if you can document it. And so a lot of times we'll just have people record like a loom of themselves doing it and talk through how
Mm.
you're making decisions in that process. So that works really well for recurring things that come up, like whether that's meal planning or like something that even if it's only recurring once a year, like summer camp planning, you could be like, okay, here's how I think about summer camps for my kids. Like it's
Yeah.
important to me that it's close and like things like that. And then for kind of one-off projects, I like to do it where you set check-in, like a check-in cadence. And
Mhm.
I think as the person going into it, there's two things I try to do, which is talk about like the who, what, where, why, like why is this even happening and
Yeah.
who's involved, and then define what I think done means. So like if someone's planning a trip for you, done could be like, oh, they picked 3 possible destinations that fall within your budget, or it could mean like every flight is booked, you have reservations every night, things like
Mm.
that. So defining what that means and then setting kind of check-in points along the way where you want to chat with them. And we
Mm.
usually suggest that, but just as a framework for how to think
Yeah.
about it.
Oh, I need some check-in points for sure. I like that idea though of defining what done means. I haven't really thought about that, and I've worked with some contractors and outsourced activities from time to time, and to be really, I think that's one of my issues is being really clear on not just like what I want, but like what it looks like when it's accomplished. So that's really helpful. Let's talk a little bit about your maternity leave preparation because you're also the founder and CEO of Sunday. So your
Yeah.
maternity leave might look a little different than what mine looked like, for instance. When is your what's your plan? Like what you want to share? I don't know if
Yeah.
you want to share your due date or how you want to play this
My
out.
I am due at the end of March, so
Okay.
March 22nd, but I'm like kind of blocking out a couple weeks ahead of time just in case. Although my mom says that if her genes have anything to do with it, it'll be way after the 22nd. But yeah, but theoretically starting in late March is my plan. And then I think it's been basically I get to define what leave looks like for myself. And nobody else on our team has gone through this process yet. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, there's a lot still to figure out, but
Yeah.
right now what I've been doing is kind of documenting all the things that I have going on, and then it's been a good time in the business where actually it's a good time to hand off a lot of things more permanently to other people so that they
Mhm.
can have ownership and grow. So I've been slowly trying to get myself out of the day-to-day processes of like doing client success and hiring and sales. And so I have these like big chunks of work where I'm trying to give somebody else responsibility before I head out.
So let's say your child is born on March 22nd. Congratulations. How many days do you think you'll go before you look at Sundays at all in any way?
That is a good question. My goal is to take like, okay, my goal is for the whole leave to be like 8 weeks long, which is, I don't know, short or long, depending on
Yeah.
what situation you're in.
That's a little short, but
Um,
understandable.
but I think that I think that I'll like truly disconnect for probably like a month and just like be like, I'm only gonna look at things like I'm like give the people who are leading different areas like they already have my phone number, but just to
Yeah.
text me in case of emergency. Otherwise, I'm like really not going to look.
Yeah.
And then maybe have kind of like a I'm trying to figure out like what the right amount of information like intake is where I feel like I know what's going on and I know it's going well, but I'm not
Yeah.
feeling stressed about it. So
Yeah.
some level of kind of like maybe weekly or like bi-weekly update from people leading different areas, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, when I went on leave, I work in sales, and there was like one deal that I just very closely working on, and I didn't really feel like it made sense to pass off to somebody else, given the relationship and everything. And so I did hold on to this one deal, and it was like it kind of bummed me out. Like it did kind of ruin
Mm,
because it didn't end up working out. So it kind of like it kind of just put a damper on like 4 weeks in when the deal fell apart, and now I had to like do stuff to salvage it. So you kind of got to do what you got to do, but yeah, like the more you can peel away from it, because
yeah.
it'll obviously the work will always be there when you get back.
Yeah, that's a good tip. Yeah, I'm hoping to practice ahead of time where I'm like, okay, these questions don't need to come to me. I'm going to loop in other people on
Yeah.
them. But yeah, was there anything that you got information on that or like that you were happy that you had information on during your leave?
Honestly, no, but just because I only really wanted to know about this one thing, and it was just
Yeah,
bad. It was just bad news for it. So
fair, fair.
that was really it. So from what you've learned from the data from Sundays, what are you doing to prepare? Like, what do you think is going to be useful that you've learned moving forward with your leave and your return to
Yeah,
work?
I think that so I talked to all these parents. I think there's a few big things that have stood out to me. One of them is just like everything, like everything's going to change, and like your ability to control those things
Hmm.
is much more limited. So,
Yeah,
I'm not sure that I can fully like make that mental leap, but at least trying to mentally prepare for that is
yeah,
good.
yeah,
The other thing that I've seen, especially with a lot of moms, is like this like societal pressure to try to be like a super mom and try to do everything yourself. And
hmm, hmm,
um, I've been fortunate to talk to a lot of parents who are on different phases of that spectrum where they're like either super overwhelmed and they're trying to do everything themselves, or they've like kind of come over a hump and they're like, okay, these are the things that are really important to me, being present with my kids and things like that.
yeah,
And so like that means I have to give these things up. So I think mentally I'm a little bit more prepared to like give things up that sometimes people hold more closely. And then the third thing is just trying to figure out like those systems that will work for us and sharing responsibilities and stuff like that.
yeah. I mean, that's one of the big topics on this show, and the episodes that do really well are when we're talking about letting go of some of those ambitious parts of you, or at least for a little while, like not needing to be an A plus in everything you're doing for a little while, because
Yeah,
there's a lot of pressure, especially on women, I think, to still crush it in their career and still be a great mom. And then you see the Instagram influencers, cutting up chicken nuggets into little squares and all kinds of stuff. And so I think that the sooner you can, yeah, just kind of learn to like let go of some of that side. And I'm sure it'll be tough because you're obviously very ambitious. You're an entrepreneur. You started a company, so there's only so unambitious you could become, right, to still be successful. But yeah, I think thinking of it in phases, and just because you might let it loose for 6 months doesn't mean you let it loose for the rest of your life, right?
yeah, yeah. I like that a lot. I think there's like I like when people refer to it as like different seasons of life and just like what are your priorities.
Yeah.
But it's really hard. Like, and even I don't even have baby yet, but in the last month, like we moved, work stuff was really crazy going into
Hmm.
January. And like,
Yeah.
I was just like, it's so ironic that I started this company that's about like being able to do both work and family. And like, it's just really hard sometimes. So I think that, and like, I don't know, like I didn't respond to all these emails as fast as I would like to and stuff like that, that just like don't feel like necessarily good representations of me. But I think that accepting that sometimes you're just not going to be perfect is seems like a huge jump.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's a big thing, and I think the sooner you could do that, the more smoothly things will go.
Yeah.
What's like your favorite part of your routine that you're worried about losing?
Ooh. My favorite part about my routine. I really well, I think I can work a kid into this, but I really like love going outside
Uh-huh.
multiple times a day. And so I'm
Okay.
like, I feel like it instead of like sometimes I can just like go outside for 20 minutes or something
Yeah.
like that. But with a baby, I'm like, okay, well, I have to like bundle them up and then like put
Hmm.
the stroller
Yeah.
and things
No,
like
that's
that.
one thing. I
It's
would
just
say
like
that's
killer.
one that you can still pull off. Yeah, we did. We were. I mean, we were in New York City. We had like this little cocoon thing we wrapped her in, so you could
Yeah.
definitely get outside. I think if you have like a big morning routine, I think that's tough to
Yeah.
do because you can't
I
do it
like
anymore.
trying to exercise before being so pregnant.
Yeah.
But now I feel like that's already fallen off a little bit. But
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of parents they get up like before their kids do. That's the only time they can really work out, which is
yeah.
tough. It was not my favorite thing to do early on either. But I had a whole like reading and drinking tea and working out and
Oh,
meditating.
that
Like
sounds nice.
you can't do all that anymore. Like not in a row anyway, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have to find times to do them and do them in different ways.
Yeah, totally. And I think the biggest thing I'm worried about is like I like having control of my time where I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
it's gonna take me 20 minutes to make breakfast or whatever. And then like I know how I like try to stack my things up to just be like really efficient with my time. But
Totally.
then you kind of like throw in this unknown variable and you're like, okay, this could take any amount of time or like most of these things might not happen because they're not the biggest priority anymore.
Totally. Totally. I want to talk a little bit more about Sundays. So, tell me more about the inspiration for starting it. When we caught up last time, you mentioned something about a conversation with your mom that had started it. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, so my mom was a lot of my inspiration for starting Sundays. She was a computer scientist in the 80s, and then when she had started having us, I'm the oldest. She worked for a couple of years, but then felt like there just was no support for balancing family and work, and so she decided to stay home with us, which I'm super grateful for. But I feel like she missed out on a little bit of personal fulfillment, and then
Hmm.
also like the world has missed out on her being able to contribute outside the home, and
Hmm.
on so many, especially moms who haven't been able to be a part of the workforce. And so, yeah, as I kind of entered the same tech industry myself later, I saw that a lot of the smartest people I know were still like struggling with this, even though it's been 30 years and like every piece of technology on my desk and your desk was probably invented in that time.
Hmm.
So it's just really interesting to see that like a lot of our cultural expectations haven't changed. And I think there's a lot of work we can do there.
Yeah. You had also mentioned aiming to solve this problem of people choosing between work and parenting. And so I'm curious, like, do you feel like the main way to solve that is to help offload certain tasks, or like what's like your grander vision for solving that problem?
Yeah, I think there's two. So we try to solve it on two sides. We try to help people who um, have like really ambitious big careers be able to offload some of this work so that they can continue to pursue those. And
Hmm.
so that's what we do on the client side. On the other side, we have an amazing team of executive assistants who we try to offer really flexible work to. So our team, they are almost all parents. They have, and then we offer them like part time roles where they still feel like they get to do like meaningful work. So we, most of them will work about 25 hours a week. They have the they're available between like 9 and 5 business hours, but they have flexibility in that time to like go pick up their kids from school or take them to dance lessons or take them to the emergency room, like things like that, that um, can be hard to fit in if you're trying to do a full time role. And so we have a lot of yeah, we have a lot of parents who are like single parents where they're like, without this job, I wouldn't be, I like, it's literally supporting my family and giving
Mhm.
me the ability to be the parent I want. So we try to create flexible work on that side too.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. That's something also I'm really curious about is like, can you create more roles like that that are still like kind of these big career roles too? And I've seen some people trying to do that themselves too.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, the other thing I wanted to ask about was like when you're building Sundays, anything that you learned about or anything that surprised you about working parents that maybe you were surprised to see how much they needed X or surprised that they didn't need help with Y?
Um, that is a good question. It's been a long time since I thought about that. Um, I think that I think I was like just really surprised as I was doing research by like I was doing research with like some of the most like highly functional people that I knew,
Hmm.
and that like basically everyone I talked to was still really struggling.
Yeah, yeah.
And yes, it's just like it's really hard for everyone, even if you like it. Yeah, even if you
That's
are really great at everything you do.
No, I mean that's probably my biggest learning from this podcast actually is because it's called successful working parents and a lot of people who I think are really crushing it are just like I don't even know if I fit this description, like
Yeah,
no one knows what they're really doing. I think that was my biggest takeaway. You realize that like as you become an adult and you get into the corporate world, that's when you first realize like oh like no one knows what they're doing out here anyway, right? Like I think you have this like reverence for like adulthood at some point, and then
yeah,
you realize like oh yeah, everyone's just kind of figuring it out, and then you become one of those people that's just figuring it out right 15 years later, and you're like oh yeah, that checks out. So then when you have a kid, it's the same thing. It's just like you're just trying to figure it out. There's no like clear rule book. There's several books, but they all have conflicting thoughts, and so I think that's like the biggest thing is just like there is no like amazing person that's crushing it all at the same time.
yeah. I love that.
Yeah,
I like the book. The book thing is so interesting because I always try to like find who has like the right way to do things, and I'll just like follow them, so I don't have to think of it myself. But like
totally. Yeah,
yeah, everything is kind of like you have to take this advice with a grain of salt, and like it might not apply to your situation, but it could maybe give you ideas. But
yeah,
I think that's one thing that's just really amazing about working parents is like they are in this such a growth mindset that like they constantly are having to like learn new things through every stage of raising a kid and figure out different solutions that are yeah, it's just super impressive.
yeah. What was it like making the jump from corporate employee to entrepreneur?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the one of the biggest things is that like you kind of lose this definition of success. Like if you're climbing the corporate ladder, you have like, okay, we have like reviews and I have my manager who's going to give me feedback and things like that. And you have this like external definition of success,
Hmm.
which maybe this will be helpful practice for parenting when I get there is kind of you have to move that external definition of success to something that you define yourself.
Yeah,
So that was one of the biggest jumps. And then um also like for people who are thinking about it, just the timeline is like a lot longer than you think. Like when you're in a corporate situation, like maybe everything happens like every month you set new goals and you accomplish those goals and stuff like that. But when especially when you're first getting started on your own, like there's so much to figure out that like the timeline is just a lot longer. And now we're kind of in a place where we operate more like a real company, but it took a long time to get here.
hmm. And did you just like take the plunge one day and leave corporate America, or did you build something on the side, or what was your journey like?
I decided that, so I was thinking about it for probably a year. Not necessarily Sundays, but just like starting my own thing, mostly because I was like, okay, I'm in a good career position if I wanted to keep growing, but
Mhm.
I'm not feeling motivated by that. Like I want to um, try starting my own thing. And actually the timing was kind of influenced by planning to have kids in the next few years. And I was like, okay, now is the time to do it
Yeah,
before I have as many dependents. And so, yeah, I was trying to start things on the side, but just like for me, I'm kind of a person who's all in on whatever I'm doing. And when I was at my job, I was like, okay, this thing is like, I would always have urgent things come up every day and then never have any time to try to build these things that I wanted to. So I ended up just leaving and then taking time to explore. And yeah, just I like jumped into it. I was like, okay, I'm going to be researching from like 9 to 5 every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that's what it takes, right? I think obviously everybody's circumstances are different about whether they're able to do that or not. But I think that there's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so productive you could be after your day job kind of takes up all your time.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, there's a few other questions that I usually ask people at the kind of at the end of the show as like a rapid fire Q&A. So I'm going to ask you some that are relevant, and obviously not the ones that are not relevant as you're preparing for working parenthood. What advice do you have for self care?
That's a good tip. I mean, I think just like making time for it is like the most important thing. So, whether that's like small things like for me going outside or trying to exercise, I literally made a like sticker chart for myself because I was like, why am I like feeling so terrible every day? And it's like, oh, because I'm not doing any of these basic things that are important to me.
Yeah,
Um, and I think just thinking like long term, like your goal is to be here doing whatever you're doing or doing something similar to that for 20 more years. So like
yeah.
what's gonna get you there? Um, and so yeah, it's just really important.
What advice do you have for someone that wants to make the jump from corporate employee to entrepreneur?
So much advice from so much advice, but also you have to figure it out on your own. But my biggest tip would just be like to do it because there's not like you can read a million things and nothing's going to show you what it's really like. So um, I would like set a timeline for yourself and just actually try it and then see if it's something that you enjoy and want to keep doing.
Yeah. What is the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. Um, okay, maybe the I just received this advice, so it's really sticking to me. But I talked to a woman who she started a very successful business that she ran for like 10 years and then she left and started something new. And I was like, okay, what's your advice? Like, how do you keep doing this for the long term? And her advice was don't burn out. And
Mm,
so going back to the self care thing, I think that just like protecting yourself is what's really going to get you through anything. So make sure that you do that because your mind and body is the foundation for everything that you want to accomplish.
Other than that, what advice would you give to your former self?
Um, hmm. One one thing that's been really helpful for me is like documenting things along the way. So like I'm a big like journaler, and I think that whenever things are really hard and things go through these big waves, whether you're starting a business or starting a family, of like, wow, this is a new challenge and it's really hard.
Hmm.
I think being able to look back and be like, okay, what was life like 1 year ago or 2 years ago, and like how far have I gotten from there?
Yeah,
Um, is something that gives me a lot of confidence when I'm facing big challenges.
I like that. So normally I ask guests what advice they have for me as a father of an 18-month-old daughter, but instead I'm going to ask what advice do you have for your future self as a soon to be parent and working parent?
Yeah. Um, I think it's those like mindset shift things that we talked about earlier, which is like it's going to be really hard. So it's hard for everyone. It's going to be hard for me. And then trying to figure out what's like truly important to me, and focusing on that, and then either letting things go or finding other ways that people can help me in the things that are less important.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on to share a little bit more about how you're preparing and how you're feeling. We'll have to check in with you after you become a working parent and
Yeah.
see how much of this has panned out and then how differently you think about it then. But this has been really great. Where can people go to connect with you, learn more about you, anything you want to share or promote?
Yeah. I am super active on LinkedIn, so you can find me. My name's Ashley Chang, but if you put in Ashley Chang Sundays, you're much more likely to find me.
Hmm.
And then our website is withsundays.com, WITH, Sundays with an S.com, if people want more information about the business.
Awesome. Well, I'll link to that in the show notes. Ashley Chang, ladies and gentlemen. Ashley, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony. This has been really fun.